Hey everybody, welcome to Fulfilled. I'm your host, Rebecca Sheehan. Well, it is that time of year again. Hay rides, jack-o'-lanterns, scouring Amazon for that perfect costume, and even here in Florida, there's a slight chill in the air. Or maybe it's just a little less humid. Growing up, Halloween was my favorite holiday, dressing up as princesses and beanie babies, trick-or-treating with friends, and of course, the candy. But when I became a Christian, I started to see Halloween a little differently. The darker elements, those gory decorations with cackling demons, bloody axes, and creepy masks, really began to bother me, even more so once our kids were old enough to notice them too. So here's the big question. Should Christians celebrate Halloween? Should Christians avoid it altogether or land somewhere in between? To help us unpack that, I've invited Amy Davison of Mama Bear Apologetics back to Fulfilled. If you're not familiar, Mama Bear Apologetics is a ministry that helps parents raise kids who can think critically and defend their faith, which includes tricky cultural questions. Amy was first on Fulfilled this past spring, sharing super helpful advice about Easter, how Christians can navigate all the secular elements while honoring Christ. And I can't wait to tackle Halloween. Amy, thanks so much for coming back on the show, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation.
So before we tackle the big question of whether Christians should celebrate Halloween, I'd love to talk about the origin of the holiday. When and where did it all start?
Yeah, the origin of the holiday is pretty fascinating because it's really the origin of two distinct holidays. So first, there's Samhain. It looks like Samhain. It's actually pronounced Samhain, and this is an ancient Celtic holiday. Usually, it would end up being at the tail end of October to the beginning of November, and it was a way of celebrating the harvest, recognizing the coming winter, as well as departed loved ones. So there would be all sorts of rituals that would be in place in this sort of celebration. So what they believed is during Samhain, the veil between the living and the spiritual realm would thin to the point to where past loved ones could come back and visit. There was believed to have been more sort of like fairy or mischievous, malevolent spirit activities. Now, part of those celebrations, what they would do is they would have 1 to 3 individuals sort of dress up as a malevolent spirit, which usually entailed some sort of animal skull, and they would go door to door, and you were supposed to offer it some sort of food offering, and that was meant to appease the spirits so they wouldn't terrorize your home, bring bad luck. It could even tie into ancient fertility ideas and just hoping for a more blessed harvest the next spring.
What does the harvest season or the end of the harvest season have to do with the veil thinning between the living and the dead?
It just had to do with their ancient belief system to where they believed that this time of year, that's when things sort of thinned and the spiritual realm would cross over. And that was part of the reason for the bonfires as well. So, part of the ways that ancient Celts and the ancient Irish would celebrate this is they would have everybody sort of extinguish their living room fires, their home fires, and they would have one big bonfire within the center of the community. And you were supposed to take an ember of that bonfire, bring it back to your home. So, I have a lot of Scottish history in my background. And so one of the stories that we were told as kids is during these celebrations, one of the reasons the bonfires were held was so that when your departed loved ones came back, they had a spot where they could warm themselves. And so there was kind of this belief system that the spiritual realm could gather close to you. And it just happened to happen at that tail end of the harvest. So it was more of this celebration of we're bringing the food in, but then we're also acknowledging that this is a time of death and renewal. And so then that sort of broad spiritual elements of contacting the dead for advice or wisdom, which is where you see, especially in the Victorian era, a lot of Halloween games around that time had to do with fortune telling and figuring out who your future spouse would be. So they would carve an apple and you were supposed to do it in all one peel and then toss it over your shoulder. And then whatever letter it formed on the ground, that was supposedly the first letter of who your spouse would be. So again, it all just sort of wrapped up within this time of year.
So, what about All Hallows Eve? Because that's sort of what I always thought Halloween was based on or had to do with.
Yeah, so we have the Celtic element that was happening with Samhain. And then All Hallows Eve, that was actually something that started out as the day preceding All Saints' Day. So All Saints' Day is actually a Catholic holiday, and it was initially started and celebrated on May 13th when the Pope dedicated the Parthenon in Rome in 1609. And that was a day to celebrate the saints, specifically those who had been martyred for the Christian faith. And then Pope Gregory III, later on during the 8th century, he was actually dedicating St. Peter's Basilica, and he switched the celebration because he wanted to combine celebrating the martyrs and then celebrating the saints, and then he switched it to November 1st, and that became All Saints' Day. So since back in the day, a lot of holidays started at sunset, that's where All Hallows Eve happened October 31st, the day before November 1st. So then we have also a later edition on November 2nd to where that would be the All Souls Day. So that was where you were to take time as Catholic to pray for those who are still in purgatory, that they would be refined and then eventually be able to join God. So these sort of 3 days came meshing together within Catholicism, and they happened to be around the same time as Samhain as well. And so there's kind of been this myth that perhaps the Catholic Church created this holiday to try to give a Christian version, so to speak, of Samhain to the ancient Celts, but there really isn't any evidence to support that. It just happened to be a coincidence of days.
That's really interesting that those different cultural traditions merged into Halloween.
Uh-huh.
Did that happen in America or earlier? Like, when did Halloween as we know it begin?
So that happened really late, actually. So we see it really taking root in America around the 1900s with the immigration of Irish settlers. And what's funny is there was a bit of a shift to where Halloween became like a night of destruction. The towns, how they would do it is they would put out things that the kids could burn or destroy.
Yeah, that sounds safe.
Yeah, I know, right? Don't you love parenting in the early 1900s?
Your kid, go light things on
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah, just go light things on fire with your friends and bring your little sister and, to where, yeah. So they
Oh,
would
wow.
go out and basically just destroy things. And there was a woman out of Illinois, her name was Mrs. Krebs. She was getting so frustrated with her flower beds being destroyed by these kids causing a ruckus. She wanted to preserve her flowers. So she started a parade, a costume parade, to where the kids could get dressed up. They do a little parade through the town, show off their clever costumes because all of it was handmade back then. And then she gave them all a treat at the end of it, and it was so popular that it just sort of caught on, and it got to the point to where there were so many kids involved that it transitioned into, okay, going from house to house and do the little trick-or-treating, and the parents would give the treats, and it evolved into this more community event rather than ancient druid worship.
So the spooky elements of Halloween that we see today, is that just because of the origins, like how it did have to do with that veil thinning and helping our relatives in purgatory?
Some of them are, we carve pumpkins now. They actually didn't used to carve pumpkins. They used to carve turnips, which is pretty impressive to me because a turnip's fairly small. But
Yeah, they're
they
so
would,
tiny.
I know, but they would carve them and put the candles in, and those were meant to sort of be spooky and scary and scare away evil spirits around the house. So we do see some things pulling in to where instead of turnips, now we carve pumpkins because that is so much easier and a little more stable. If you watch Call the Midwife, they'll have Halloween episodes, and what's cute is you'll see the kids, they've got these sticks with the little turnips hanging from it, so you get to kind of see what the lanterns look like back then.
Oh.
And then, of course, with the treats, there are anchors into food offerings. That's why the kids say trick or treat, because it was believed if you gave an offering, then they wouldn't curse your house. And so now you have little kids who are going up saying trick or treat, and it's just to get a fun size Hershey bar. So there are some things that have anchors in ancient ceremonies. However, a lot of what we're seeing today has shifted into just gore. Like the 90s really ushered in that sort of horror movie genre. I mean, we had it previously with Texas Chainsaw Massacres, but it seems like really in the 90s, that's where you saw, Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, to where now so much of Halloween decorations is just that it's just horror movie. It makes your front yard look like it's just a scene from these awful movies. And so, yeah, those things are now more of a modern implement of saying, okay, this isn't just, fun with the kids decorating. Now let's try to scare people, and let's use really graphic ways to do so, which is, those haunted houses that you can pay to go to now. It's all just like body parts hanging. It's awful. So
Yeah.
that's modern influence right there.
I'll never forget, like 2 years ago, I think, my kids were maybe 4 and 5. We walked into a party city,
Oh,
and
yeah.
as soon as we walk in, there's this 20-foot tall, demonic looking skeleton with
Mm.
hood and a bloody axe that was coming down
Yeah.
towards the kids. And they were so scared, they were almost crying. It's like, why is that necessary?
Yeah, we've seen
But
that
maybe
before.
that's
Like,
just me.
no, it's not just you. I'm with you. There have been times when my kids were little and we would go trick or treating. There were some houses that were set up like, the awful stuff. And there's a creepy guy with his, fake chainsaw and everything. That's just there to be gross and, degradation of human life. I was like, nope, we're not going
Yeah.
to go to that house. We'll go over next door.
So this is actually a great segue to my next question. Our family generally stays away from the violent and spooky elements of Halloween because
Mm,
they just bother us.
yeah.
But can you unpack how that's specifically unchristian or against our Christian values and why?
Yeah, so the biggest aspect with modern Halloween celebrations is that it is a complete degradation of human life to where so much of the celebration is focused not only within the demonic realm, but within, slasher films, body parts hanging around, gratuitous violence. I mean, it is a horror show. As believers, what we acknowledge is that life is precious. And so that is not to be reduced to a punchline or a scene in a horror movie flick. So all of those, like especially with my boys when they were little, I would tell them like we're not going to be, there's no sort of demonic costumes, no axe murderer costumes, none of that stuff because we're not going to play around and celebrate with that really just degradation of humanity and the objectification of the human body that we see so prevalent within Halloween. And having a daughter now, we're going to have to also talk about Halloween costumes too, because unfortunately, as you all know, as a girl mom, I mean, after about that 9, 10 age range, all of the costumes get very suggestive. And so now it's okay, how are we also seeing sexuality exploited? So as Christians, we always want to draw to what is good, true, and beautiful. And so when it comes to a lot of modern Halloween celebrations, it glorifies in the occult, it glorifies in axe murder and gratuitous violence, and that is something that we don't play around with. We don't celebrate. Starting over kids wise, we had all of my boys in Germany. It was a military community. Halloween was mainly just you were there to socialize with the community, and the kids got candy, and you said hi to your officers. And then coming stateside, there's definitely a huge shift because in Germany it's still not huge. Halloween isn't big, but stateside it's big, but it's more toward the gory. Especially now that I've got a 2-year-old little girl, I'm already thinking there's probably going to be a lot of really awful stuff there. So now I'm shifting more toward maybe we need to go to more of the harvest festivals at church to where, oh, this is a time of fellowship that we keep the focus on Christ. If the kids want to dress up, no big thing. They're going to get some candy, but it's eliminating opportunities of encountering horror and gore that I think is important.
So hard to avoid. Like even our boys love
Yeah.
watching football, NFL Sundays with my husband.
Yeah.
But even like in the commercials, there are all these horror movies advertised, and the
Well,
commercials are legitimately scary.
and what's I don't know if you've noticed this, Rebecca. It seems like there's just been this revival of horror movies. You watch TV and the previews come out. It seems like every movie that's coming out now, it's deeply demonic and occultic in symbolism. My husband and I were looking at it. We're like, well, that's an occult symbol. That's a satanic symbol. And we're like, how has this now become entertainment? And that's unsettling and problematic because if a culture has been so desensitized to the demonic and the occult, then that allows for potentially a stronghold to occur within Satan. And so that is how we have had the discussions with our kids, and they understand it. And that's what kids want because when they understand why, that's where reverence comes in. So when they understand, oh, this isn't just for fun, this actually celebrates someone abusing another person's body. That's not okay. That helps them understand when mom and dad say, no, we're not going to participate in that. And there's less of a hostile reaction from the child or, oh, that's unfair. It's just so important for us to give them a good theology with regards to this. So that way they can stand firm and confident in their faith and not maybe get lured into something that could even potentially lure them into the occult.
Speaking of the occult and reasons why Christians shouldn't celebrate Halloween, let's talk about what the Wiccans use that day for, and the Satanists as well.
Yeah. So Adam LaVey, he was the founder of modern Satanism, and he basically called Halloween Satan's Day. Now, from a theological standpoint, this is completely false because Satan does not have a day. God never gave him a day. Also, when we look at ancient Samhain celebrations, there was a fluctuation of when it would be celebrated. So, while a lot of individuals who celebrate on Halloween have stuck to October 31st, that actually isn't consistent with ancient Samhain practices. In fact, there's actually a lot of debate among pagans, neo-pagans, Wiccans, that sort of thing, on when to actually celebrate it. However, and I can tell you from personal experience, because I pursued Wicca for a year in high school, what I can tell you is that on Halloween, there are individuals that get together and they will do ceremonies. They will often try to do some sort of scrying, which is, trying to contact the spiritual realm, whether it's to gain wisdom, to contact with some sort of spirits, which I will affirm here, there are no such thing as good ghosts and bad ghosts. There's only the demonic realm.
I guess my next question would be if Wiccans are using the holiday for magic and Satanists are using the holiday to worship Satan, does that make Halloween in and of itself bad? Should we avoid it because of those things? And then I want to go into why it would be okay to celebrate Halloween too.
Yeah, so it's a tough question to answer because in some sense, if a group of individuals picks out a day to celebrate it, does that necessarily corrupt that day completely? I don't think that just because they have chosen one day, that day is completely corrupted, because again, all of time belongs to God. There's also amazing things that have happened on October 31st. We have Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the front door of the church, which is why if you're on a seminary campus, you'll actually see theology professors. Their students will very often glue 95 Reese's onto their front door as sort of a tongue-in-cheek reference to Luther. So we can say, okay, the start of the Protestant Reformation happened on October 31st.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah. So there's ways to point out the good that's happening on there. And when we say that, well, Halloween is completely corrupted to its core, we can't have anything to do with it. In some ways, we have to be careful, because what that means is if I'm trick-or-treating or if I'm putting a pumpkin out or something, then I'm maybe engaging in some sort of devil worship, idol worship, that sort of thing. But the flip side of that is, well, that means that if any person walks into a church, sits and sings the songs, well, that makes them a Christian. So works in and of themselves don't necessarily count as worship. What makes for actual worship? It's a relationship with God and a point of veneration in there. And I think sometimes trying to separate from the demonic and evil, if we're not careful, that can bleed into things that are innocuous. A few years ago, I was walking into a store and there was a fall display, a stack of plastic pumpkins, that you could buy. And there was a little boy who had picked it up and he's like, "Look, Mom, a pumpkin." And his older brother says, "No, you need to put that down. Don't you know that's the devil's day? You're engaging in devil worship." And the kid dropped the pumpkin. He looked terrified, and the mom nodded and was like, "Yep, yep." And she moved on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid's going to be terrified of pumpkins now, because he's going to think this common squash that we see very prevalent in centerpieces and stuff around Halloween and Thanksgiving. Now he's going to think, man, if I even touch this thing, I'm engaging in demonic worship of some sort. And then especially for, these kids, if they're going to school, if they're brought up telling, oh man, anyone who dresses in a costume and goes trick-or-treating is engaging in devil worship, well, they're going to look at their whole classmates and say every single person's a devil worshiper. And that may not be the case. They may just be a kid who's excited to dress up like Paw Patrol and get some candy. So that's where I think it's important for us that we're called in Colossians 4:6 to have all of our conversations heaping with grace but seasoned with salt, so that our children understand the truth and the reality of the matter, but also have the grace to recognize that a lot of these kids that are going out trick-or-treating, they're not doing any form of idol worship. They're not doing any sort of demonic activity. They're just going for a fun-sized Snickers bar. Like that's the whole motivation. And I think that'll help guard kids from perhaps a dangerous form of legalism when it comes to this holiday.
Makes a lot of sense. So pumpkins, innocuous, Paw Patrol, innocuous. It brings up the interesting question of where to draw the line.
Yeah.
So I thought it could be fun to do a little lightning round where I mentioned some different Halloween motifs and
Okay.
tell me okay, not okay.
I will
Ready?
do my best. And I just fair warning, this is based on personal conviction. And first and foremost, always seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit when it comes to these issues. So,
Got it. So pumpkins,
uh,
non-jack-o'-lantern variety.
not a problem. They are just a squash and they're absolutely beautiful this time of year.
Just a squash. What about carving jack-o'-lanterns?
Me personally, I don't have a problem with carving jack-o'-lanterns. It's a fun, spooky face. I think it actually can give an opportunity to even have a discussion of why they would carve the jack-o'-lanterns and the purpose of it, so that kids understand the reason why. So play that one by ear, but use it as an opportunity to discuss why jack-o'-lanterns were carved.
And for us, have a fun family tradition of carving them, and we do silly, cute faces, not
And that,
demonic-looking
oh
ones.
yeah, us too. We would always do cute faces, and I mean, man, you could even do like fun different themes to where if you want to do like a Bible verse, that sort of thing. There's so many opportunities, but yeah, we always draw the line at anything gruesome.
Speaking of gruesome, spooky ghosts.
Yeah, anything that was gory, demonic, that sort of thing, we stayed away from.
Cute ghosts, like the little Snapchat variety.
Man, that is a tough one. I would say base that on your kids. If they understand the difference between perhaps a cutesy decoration, because they're going to see Target now has a bunch of little puppies dressed up in those. Like the kids need to know the difference, but that might be one to sort of steer away from if kids aren't mature enough to understand the difference between a cartoon and the reality of the demonic realm.
Talk about witches, spooky witches versus cute witches, and also accessories like witches' hats and broomsticks.
Yeah, yeah. So any of that stuff can be seen as cutesy. Like, oh gosh, you really can. You can make dinosaurs and cockroaches adorable. I mean, just ask Disney. So,
Cockroaches?
so that one I would say play by ear. Don't engage with it if your children don't know the difference between make believe and reality, because unfortunately, a lot within the neo pagan, the Wiccan religion, they still do a lot of the capes and things. So there is some correlation in there. So that one, I would say that one's more of that gray leaning to maybe not engage with that one.
Yeah, that's one that we've sort of started to stay away from too.
Yeah.
Speaking of witches, black cats, bats, vampires.
Yeah,
Well, I guess those aren't all in the same category. Maybe
I
just black
know.
cats and bats for now.
Yeah, so the vampires know. Black cats, they're just cats. But unfortunately, they try to say they have this spooky connotation. I would use that as an opportunity to be like, is a black cat any, spookier than an orange cat? No, or our calico cat, that sort of thing. Nope, it's just a cat. So if anything, sort of demystify, despookify these creatures. And what are bats? Bats are really helpful for taking out the mosquito population. They don't change into vampires, that sort of thing. So those two things, I would actually discuss, okay, what are they actually? How have they been kind of co-opted into this sort of culture there? And nope, bats are helpful little creatures around our community. Cats are just fluffy little balls that we enjoy, but they're not spooky or demonic in any way.
I'm sensing a pattern here that a lot of it just has to do with talking to your kids.
Discernment. Oh my gosh, Rebecca, discernment is key with these kids because they naturally want to know, and you can use all things to the glory of God if we are just bold enough to speak about them. So you can talk about and be like, oh, this is kind of why people see cats are spooky. So yeah, take advantage of those little moments and have these great discussions because your kids want to know.
What do you tell your kids about superstition? Because I always say it's not a Christian thing, and so you
Yeah,
don't have to worry about a black cat crossing your path. Like,
yeah.
we're free from all that.
Yeah, and we're called not to give into superstition and even old wives' tales, which while I was pregnant, I actually had to sort of disengage with that because when you're waiting to figure out whether you have a boy or a girl, there's all these
Oh,
different
yeah.
old wives' tales on how to figure that out before the blood test comes back. And then I read that passage and I'm like, darn it, yep, I got to stay away from this. So when it comes to superstitions, what's helpful for kids to know is usually this is based on an actual occurrence. Like somebody, walked under a ladder and then something bad happened to them right after. And then they thought, oh, it's because I went under the ladder, or it's because a black cat crossed my path. So they're somewhat rooted in truth, meaning something negative did happen, but then they jump to the conclusion that, oh, if this happens at all, then something bad is going to occur. Like if you step on a crack, you break your mother's back. I mean, I think we all said that as kids, and no, our mothers are walking around and they're fine. So I think with kids, it's okay. This was based on perhaps a negative experience that happened to someone that potentially made them scared or fearful of this. But is that true? Is it the case that anytime a black cat walks in front of you, then bad luck's going to happen? And kids they're clever. They're like, no, of course not. So again, demystifying the superstition around the belief.
In terms of costumes,
Mm,
I guess you've talked about how the violent and the sexy ones are not good, but
yeah.
other costumes, okay?
Yeah, so within our family, we didn't really have much of a problem with costumes because of discussions we had. They weren't ever drawn to the graphic, the violent, that sort of thing. I mean, my kids dressed up as, oh gosh, Marshall from the Paw Patrol, a
We
soldier
had a
once.
Marshall
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah. In fact, I think we had Marshall for a couple years because that was a hardcore Paw Patrol addiction for like 4 years. So, oh, my son was an inflatable dinosaur one year. Not a
Nice.
problem. We had a soldier at one point, Batman at one point. These are mythological characters. And what's amazing, especially if they're into Marvel heroes, there's a really good book you can get that's called Hollywood Heroes by Frank Turek and his son. They show how these movies actually are a reflection of Christianity and how some of their best plot points they actually pull from scripture. And so if you've got a kid who wants to dress up like Batman or Indiana Jones or even Harry Potter, they cover Harry Potter in that book as well.
That's what I was going to ask next.
Yep.
Harry Potter.
They cover Harry Potter to where you can get that book and then be like, okay, daughter's wanting to dress like Hermione or whatever. You can go and read and say, okay, how did J.K. Rowling pull in biblical themes throughout the book and have this amazing Christ-centered conversation? And so it's one of those to where, we're told in Second Timothy that not to have that spirit of fear, to where when it comes to Halloween and all this stuff, perhaps some of our fear is just rooted in a lack of knowledge, to where, man, if we just dive into some information, boldly speak about it to our kids, then all of a sudden the fear goes down because now we've taken away the mystery, the allure, that sort of thing, and we've been able to point it back to Christ.
So what about fantasy and magic
Yeah.
books, costumes, characters? I mean, C.S. Lewis, of course, wrote Narnia, which is a whole allegory for Christianity. Love
Yeah.
those. But I mean, Harry Potter sounds like it's okay.
So there's biblical themes within Harry Potter. There's also a lot of pagan themes within C.S. Lewis Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, he's got Bacchus in one of the books. He was the god of drunken revelry. So that's where, again, it's really important for us to not drift into hyper legalism when it comes to this, because if we're saying, okay, any depiction of this is evil and bad, well then of course C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, all of that falls into there. So that's where we need that bit of discernment. So and let me look, if you don't mind me looking up this one book that I was suggested. It's called On Magic and Miracles, the Theological Guide to Discernment when it comes to discerning fictional magic. So this was written by Marian Jacobs. And so I was offered that book by a reader. She said, oh, this was fantastic in helping discuss those elements that we see within witchcraft, centaurs, that sort of thing that we see across the mythical realm with regards to Lewis, Tolkien, and Rowling. And so again, Hollywood Heroes and On Magic and Miracles would be a great resource to dive into.
Because, yeah, you don't want to stifle your kids' imagination or make them think that anything made up is bad.
Yeah, imagination is a gift from God. And some of our children have an overflowing abundance of that gift. And to where now it's one of those things to where we want to channel imagination for the glory of the kingdom. And we can do that even with what the world provides. So we just have to boldly take advantage of it.
All right, back to our where to draw the line. Halloween music, like Ghostbusters, Thriller,
Yeah.
Addams Family theme song.
One-armed, one-horned, flying purple people eater, the monster mash. Okay, often those are just
Monster Mash.
yeah, I know. And those are, I love it. Anytime I hear that, I instantly think of being a kid back in choir class. We're in full on fiction with that. That's just more of like funny, goofy. I don't see a lot of things that are truly inherently harmful. It's just, oh, this is a spooky song. Spooky, right? In a very G-rated sense, to where it's just more funny noises and little references to mythological creatures like werewolves and that sort of thing. No, those aren't actually real. And so I don't see much harm in those songs. But again, each person's discretion.
Because I know too that you are what you surround yourself with. And so I'm pretty careful about, movies, TV shows,
Yeah.
music.
Hmm.
So along those lines, what about horror movies? Like the really creepy, violent ones, but
Hmm.
also the kids' movies like Hocus Pocus,
Yeah.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah. So, I mean, no contest. Any sort of horror movie, there's no, like that. That is a hard stop. No, because any movie that sort of glorifies this, celebrates it, and revels in it, this is going to have an impact on you mentally, spiritually. Because yes, what you consume, it will affect you. And so that's hard stop no. When it comes to kids movies, I gotta urge caution with those. It really depends on the personality of the kid. Some kids are very attuned into truth and falsehood, and they'll be able to spot the lies and they won't be affected, but other kids will be lured in. And just speaking from personal experience, there was a movie that came out when I was a kid called Halloween Town, and Halloween Town was about this grandmother who approaches her daughter and her daughter's two children, and the grandmother wants the daughter to tell the granddaughter that she is in fact come from a lineage of witches. And so she gives the granddaughter a cloak and everything. The granddaughter, when she puts on the cloak, she spins around and she goes, "Oh, cool, I'm a Wiccan." And as a kid, I remember thinking, man, if Disney Channel is talking about Wiccans, then Wiccans must not be bad, because Disney Channel is a channel for kids, so they wouldn't ever give kids bad things. And that's just not true. That's not how culture works. Culture is actively inundating children with secular and even satanic messages, LGBTQ affirming messages, all of these things. So we have to be very careful in vetting our kid shows. Now, I will say that one show didn't cause me to actually embrace Wicca. It was something that desensitized me to it, to where when I was in high school, I had a really bad experience with a girl who claimed she was a Christian. She was absolutely horrific to me. And the only people I could hang around and they wouldn't mock me was the Wiccan group. And they said, well, you really can't trust those Christians, because they actually added passages in the Bible later to be able to persecute witches. And you have Scottish heritage. So really pursuing after Wicca, that's more authentic to who you are. And that was the tipping point for me. It was actually the bad witness of the Christian and the pagan crowd at my school actually feeding me full of lies, and I wasn't able to recognize it. But I will say that movie as a kid helped desensitize me to it, because gosh, if Disney Channel's talking about Wicca, then why would it be bad? And we see other networks doing this too, whether it's like Owl House, which incorporates actual witchcraft elements and satanic elements within their TV shows. You really need to vet those carefully, and for the most part, just I would say probably keep those out.
That is really interesting. I mean, I was just reflecting the other day on how I feel like a lot of my bad decisions as a high schooler were not caused by, but maybe I was primed for them by the music I listened to, those like Britney Spears pop songs
Yeah.
and all of that. So, I mean, it's so important,
Yeah.
the media that we show to our kids.
Yeah.
So let's shift over into practical advice, like for parents who want to avoid Halloween altogether.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for them on fun things they could do on Halloween or around that time so that their kids aren't just sad and wishing
Yeah.
they could partake in Halloween?
Feeling they're left out, man. And that's probably going to take a little bit of work, because depending on your setup at home, like maybe if you have the light shut off, that's usually the universal symbol that if the lights are shut off at the front of the house, then they're not taking trick-or-treaters. But I know that probably doesn't stop all trick-or-treaters. So it might be something to where you as a family, you go to like a sort of family fun zone. Like we've got a place called Shenanigans that has, bowling, laser tag games, that sort of thing. And it could be a fun night away that you guys have to where you're together as a family. Or if there's a good movie that's out, maybe we take a movie night, or go out to eat. You're not going to be able to escape it altogether, but that could be a fun way for you as a family to go and do something together to nurture just family togetherness.
I like that. So, personally speaking, what does your family do with Halloween? And did your kids go trick-or-treating? I know you have the older ones, so they're probably out of that phase, but like
Yeah,
what are you
they're too cool
planning on
now.
doing with your daughter?
So we don't do any of like the gory decorations or anything. I just have fall stuff in my house, because I love it and I think it's beautiful. The fall leaves, the pumpkins, it's God's creation. We can surround our homes in that, because that is the beauty of creation, which points back to the divine creator. It's beautiful. And so Maddie will probably do a little bit of trick-or-treating. She's a huge Bluey fan, and so she's already been kind of eyeing the bingo costumes and things. So we'll probably do a little bit of trick-or-treating, but we are very proactive in discussing with our kids, why this holiday is so popular, the pagan origins of aspects of this holiday. We also bring in Martin Luther, because church history is always fun to throw in there as well. So that way our kids understand the realities of the demonic realm, but also understand that, if you're dressing up and going for candy to your neighbor's house on this day, that is not the same as satanic worship. So that way the kids they don't drift into this legalism, which a lot of kids really do. So we that's how we've always operated in the past, and that's how we're going to move forward. We're already planning on doing a little bit of trick-or-treating, but yeah, especially with her being 2, and even with my boys, we always steered away from the really gory houses. So it'll probably be a very low-key, quick affair, and then we're back home, and I'm mostly eating the candy for myself because I do like those small Twixes. So
2-year-olds don't last very long anyway, trick-or-treating.
no,
I
yeah,
remember it was
they
like a 20-minute affair.
Oh, I know. So yeah, we've never gone into, the gory stuff, none of the scary movie. We don't do any of that stuff because we understand the realities of the spiritual realm and that does affect you. So we stay away from that. But, just the lighthearted, you're going to dress up like something cute and go get some candy. That to us is a non-issue at the time being. Now, if it grew to a point to where maybe one of our kids we started noticing a budding obsession perhaps with the occult or an interest that is more than just a passing, oh, why don't we do this? That's when we would probably take more proactive steps in separation because now we're seeing the lure to a child. So that's where we would shift. So we take kind of the military Semper Gumby approach, always flexible to where it's okay, we're doing this here, but if we see compromises being made, well, then we pull back.
And if you feel the Holy Spirit calling you
Absolutely.
strongly in a certain direction, then
Yeah.
you listen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And at Mama Bear, we've got a guide. I'm currently working on the edits for it, but we've got a guide to Halloween that goes into history, why people don't celebrate, why they're completely justified in not celebrating, why some people do participate in the trick or treating, and how to have a Christ-like reaction to that, just so we can help people understand both sides of the issue well. So we'll have the edits fixed up here soon, and then that guide available on Mama Bear Apologetics.
Here's my new Halloween idea. Well, this comes from the fact that our favorite household candy is Reese's, but you
Ooh,
could emphasize the 95 Theses a little bit more and like
yeah,
maybe hand out, I don't know, like a little pamphlet or something about
yeah.
that, because a lot of people don't know that October 31st is also known for Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses. So like I think that's a really special thing that we could use Reese's for.
And everybody loves Reese's to where you could easily do a cute Reese's and then a reference to Martin Luther. That would be hilarious. I love that. I mean, no other time of the year are you going to have so many people coming to your door to where they will
That is
actually,
true.
yeah, they'll sit out front. I've known people, they have their little burn pit, their coffees, depending on where you're at, but they'll sit out there and they have their candy, but they actually wrap either a Bible message around the piece of candy, and they actually use it as a way to be like, hey, are you a part of a church? You should come check out. We've got an amazing children's program to where they actually leverage the people coming in to point them to Christ. So again, there's ways to be able to use this to the furtherance of the kingdom.
So, wrapping up, you talked about so many good ideas about how to navigate Halloween with our kids. Are there any Bible verses that you can point our listeners to that would really kind of help illuminate this topic for them?
A few of them we've mentioned throughout this podcast, but one that sticks out is 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. And that's recognizing that how we live our lives, even in just this small stuff, we need to make sure that we are reflecting God's glory in the midst of it. And Halloween is one of those to where yes, we can honor Him by separating ourselves, and yes, we can also honor Him by seeing it as an outreach event as well to maybe bring people to your church, to your life group, whatever it may be. So that could be a good opportunity depending on where God's calling. And then, of course, we've got Colossians 4:6, let all your conversations be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you know how to answer everyone. And that's just an important encouragement for parents to speak truthfully with regards to the holiday, help your children understand why, and to perhaps maybe practice conversations with them on, well, let's say your friend, invites you over to a spooky Halloween party, how would you respond? Give your kids the ability to practice at home because it's a safe space at home. It helps them be more proficient in sharing their faith and sharing the reasons why in a non-threatening manner. And of course, as we mentioned, 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind, to where we don't need to be afraid of Halloween. Instead, we need to speak boldly about it with regards to our families and help our children understand the background, how things have changed, and how we can now glorify God with what we do. And so, again, just taking those short passages there to help encourage not only nurturing the faith, but also living in a Christ-like way that shows people the beauty of the gospel.
I love that. And I think the biggest takeaways for me personally are to not be fearful of Halloween first, and then also how you can sort of veer into legalistic territory if
Yeah.
you start judging everybody else for celebrating. So it's interesting. So, how can anyone watching or listening access your Mama Bear Halloween guide and other useful resources.
Oh yeah, and we've got several. We've got one. I want to say we've got one for Easter. We got our Halloween, even Christmas, because some Christmas celebrations can also have some pagan roots there. We had some questions about that a few years ago, to where we even did a podcast on it as well, about a history of Christmas. So if you're looking for all of that, you just need to go to our website, mamabearapologetics.com. That's MAMA Bear Apologetics, all one word, .com. And on the resources, we have different guides, and you sign up, you put your email in there, and then boom, it's emailed directly to you. And so that is a place where you can go for information. And then if you want to hit our blogs and podcasts and just either type in Halloween, ghosts, or, if you're interested on the Christmas side of things, Christmas, because that's going to be here before we know it, just type that in. It'll bring up all the resources for you to be able to listen, to grow. And especially like the one I recorded a year ago on ghosts, you could actually listen to that, especially if you've got older kids or teenagers. That's really helpful, because the occult is really promoted among teens, especially teen girls. And so that would be a good one to watch, even with your teenager, just so you could have good discussion.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. And I can personally vouch for the Mama Bear Christmas Guide. It was amazing and really helped us throughout celebrating the Advent season with our kids.
Awesome.
I loved this conversation and really appreciate your time. So thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thanks to all of you, our awesome listeners, for tuning in. And your support means so much. So if you enjoyed today's spooky conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Stay inspired, keep trusting in God's plan for your life, and we'll see you next time.